Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the City Futures Committee meeting Tuesday, 12th of August 2025. In terms of health and safety, if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the nearest emergency exit through that door there and assemble down Devonport Road. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Members, could you please ensure you speak clearly into the microphone and only one person speaking at a time, and please put your phones into silent mode. Thank you. I'd like to call on Councillor Rolleston for the karakia.
Tēnā koe te timana, te memo o te hapori, tēnā koutou, nau mai, haere mai I tēnei ata. Kia noi tātou. Tui runga, tui raro, tui roto, tui waho, tui te tangata, karangata a karangata pō, nau mai te I, te wei, te mana te tapu, pau ki roto ki tēnei hui I tēnei ata, ko ia rā e rongo, whakiriraki ki runga, turu whakamaua ki a tīna. Haumi e hui e, taiki.
Thank you, Councillor. Apologies. I'd like to accept an apology from the Deputy Mayor, Jen Scaller. She will not be attending today. And also note that the Mayor is currently late. He's at a meeting and he will be arriving when he is here. Thank you, Councillor Kurik, and I'll second. All those in favour of accepting the apologies, say aye. That is the apologies. We now move to the public forum. We have two speakers today. First up, Liz Davies from Social Link, speaking about planning for people in social infrastructure and new developments. Welcome, Liz. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Liz Davies. I'm Chief Executive of Social Link, who most of you know is the umbrella peak organisation for the social and community sector here in the Western Bay of Plenty. I'm here to make the case that community wellbeing must be placed at the very heart of our planning for the city's future, not an afterthought, not a nice to have, but a fundamental necessity. At Social Link, we believe that thriving communities don't just happen. They're not a natural byproduct of growth. They're the result of intentional decisions that place people and wellbeing at the heart of planning. I visited a council in outer Melbourne that starts land use planning with social infrastructure, not pipes and roads. In Singapore, the Urban Development Authority partners with community and business groups to support ground-up ideas to plan for neighbourhoods. So it's possible to plan starting with the people, not the pipes. When we prioritise community wellbeing from the outset, we don't just build homes, roads and parks, we build belonging, we build resiliency. We build the kind of tauranga that our tamariki and mokopuna will thank us for. I don't think we've always got this right. We've been asked by Council in response to community requests to undertake a community and social services assessment in Papamoa East, given the lack of social services and community spaces to support people who may be struggling and don't want to drive or can't drive to Tauranga. I have also heard many people make submissions to the annual and long-term plans from Tauriko, asking for community and sports spaces. People need and want places to connect. Wellbeing is not an add-on. It's not the thing we consider after the roads are in and the consents are approved. It's the very foundation. If we get wellbeing right from the outset, we don't need to retrofit, which is inevitably more expensive, and it will reduce lots of submissions that you currently receive demanding community space. So how do we do this? 3 ideas: build with connection in mind. Isolation is one of the most significant predictors of poor wellbeing, so let's design neighbourhoods where people can bump into each other literally. Shared green spaces, community gardens, local cafes, well-lit paths, they all create micro moments of connection that build trust and social cohesion. Let's make the third places, those vital spaces outside of work and home, easy to find and access. Prioritise local services, social infrastructure and community anchors. Like Moraia's for hapu, communities need their own beating hearts that brings them together. That might be a community hall, a library, or a hub that brings together social services, cultural groups and neighbourhood support. Too often things like libraries, community hubs, sports fields and health services are afterthoughts. added in when pressure mounts. But research shows there are economic drivers as well as social ones. In fact, communities with good social infrastructure attract residents and local investment. Having said that, I do acknowledge that you have to rely on central government, i.e. Ministry of Education to whātau ora, to plan for schools and health services. But they're often, for a range of reasons, do not come to the party in a consistent, reliable manner, which makes it really hard to plan for vital social infrastructure. Embed lived experience and community voices in your planning if you want to build communities that work for people, involve people from the start. It's co-design is not a buzzword. It's necessary to bring people to build communities where people want to live. This means working with iwi, community groups, rangatahi. Let's design with, not for. Let's listen first and design second. So you're not just councillors, you are community builders and legacy makers. You have the chance to shape the kind of city where well-being isn't the icing on the cake, it is the cake. Let's not leave the soul of our communities to chance. Let Tauranga not just be a city that grows, but a city that grows well. This is a bigger conversation, and I'd welcome the opportunity to kōrero with you more about this, perhaps once the Papamoa East assessment is completed later this year, and we understand more about that local community's needs. So ngā mihi nui, and thank you for the important mahi you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz, and I'm definitely on board and agree. Questions? Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and good morning to you. Just in regard to that report on Papamoa East, will that be circulated to council or
absolutely.
Through a council meeting? Yeah, can you explain that process to me?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking to a lot of providers. We're going to do a demographic profile, including talking to councillors representing the area and council staff, and making that report available end of November.
Councillor Crowther and then Councillor Taylor, and that'll be it.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. You're very familiar with council processes, so I'll just ask you, I guess in the context that we've got a regional deal coming up, and what you've said, I think, certainly echoes well with what I'd like to see in a regional deal, which is a focus on that infrastructure. But at the end of it all, someone's paying for it. Are you suggesting at a very practical level that we put more community facilities into infrastructure plans for new greenfield areas and put in the growth, pays for growth principle, the developers and ultimately the homeowners will pay more to have a better community to live in? Is that sort of the end game here?
Yeah, and I suppose it's also central government money, not just local government money. But I think, like I was saying, it attracts people. Good social infrastructure brings people to communities, and you want to have a decent quality of life. You want to be a part of the community. So I think it is vital as pipes and roads. Yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Liz, and probably a timely reminder that we do more than just roads and pipes. Working with, I think you said in your presentation, what does that look like from your side? How would you like to engage with council on this going forward, rather? Like, is it just addressing the forum, or is there some other way you see that happening?
Oh, it'd be great to have, like I was saying, once we've done that Papamoa East assessment, to have the opportunity to perhaps workshop with council around what we're finding, what are the options for communities like Papamoa East to have social service provision, community space, and to then be thinking about that for the new emerging communities, so we don't make the same mistakes as has been done sometimes in Tauriko and Papamoa East.
Thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you. I
It's been a
appreciate
pleasure.
your time. Thank you.
And we look forward to hearing from you again. Now I'd like to invite Tisha Jackson and Ranui Samuels, and they are going to speak to us today on Sleep and Go pods. Welcome to council.
Sorry about that. Tēnā koutou I te konihera. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Ranui Samuels, and I'm here on behalf and with the Jackson family in partnership with Hayata Trust, Bright Spark, and Rongoa Pono. We are here because Tauranga faces an urgent growing problem, the shortage of affordable, short-term safe accommodation. Seasonal workers, event attendees, shift workers, and visitors are struggling to find somewhere secure to sleep. But it's not just visitors. This shortage directly impacts our most vulnerable whānau. Homelessness in Tauranga has been steadily rising. Every night, more people are sleeping rough, in cars, on park benches, or moving from couch to couch. Many are working but can't afford rising rents. Others are in transition after relationship breakdowns, job losses, or health challenges. And while emergency housing exists, it's often full, unsuitable, or located far from work and support services. This is where Sleep and Go steps in. At the heart of our proposal is Manaakitanga, the responsibility to care for people and ensure they are safe, welcomed, and looked after. Our solution is practical, scalable, and designed to meet multiple needs, from travelers to workers to those in urgent housing need. We offer 3 models. Sleep and Go pods, small fixed location, weatherproof pods placed in CBD areas, near transport hubs or in strategic spots. Each pod is secure, powered, and equipped with a bed charging port, ventilation, and lighting. Sleep and Go bus, a fully converted coach or city bus with private sleeping bays and amenities. It can move between locations daily or seasonally, responding to events, emergency needs, or seasonal work demands. Sleep and Go motel, an indoor capsule system housing 20 to 40 private capsules inside a converted warehouse or commercial building, ideal for high capacity or weather accommodation close to CBD or industrial areas. For the homeless community, these models mean safety, secure spaces with monitored access and on-site support; dignity, a private, warm, and clean place to sleep; access, close to transport, work opportunities, and community services; stability, a constant location to sleep while seeking permanent housing. Across all models, we maintain high standards, controlled entry, CCTV, fire safety, and app-based booking where appropriate. Why is this right for Tauranga? It's flexible, we can adapt to each area's needs. It's scalable. Start small, expand as demand grows. It's fast. Deploy quickly, in months, not years. It's safe. Purpose-built for security and well-being. It's affordable. Low nightly rates and sustainable operation. We believe Sleep and Go can become part of Tauranga's housing solution, bridging the gap between emergency shelters and long-term housing, while also serving visitors and workers. With the right locations and partnerships, this initiative can immediately reduce the number of people sleeping rough. Our vision is simple: a city where nobody has to choose between unsafe sleeping arrangements and financial hardship just to have a bed for the night. A city where workers can take shifts because they have somewhere nearby to rest. A city where Manaakitanga is not just a word, but reality in our urban design. With your support, we can roll out the first units within months, hopefully, not years. We're ready to partner with Council, iwi, community organizations, and the private sector to make it happen. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you very much. Do I have questions? Councillor Kirek.
Kia ora. I mean, that was a great concept. I haven't read through the papers that have been distributed, but is there a model that you could sort of, focus on in terms of it's proven and there are a few issues once it's rolled out? Is there around the world or New Zealand a good model?
Yeah, so the sleep capsule and the sleep bus are both being run in Australia. The capsules themselves are located in Melbourne with a community charity organisation over there, and the sleep bus has a model working out of Sydney, so we'll be following theirs.
And they haven't had many issues to date around the concept and
The only issue has been with the sleep buses, the continued finance for maintaining and running costs.
Councillor Morris, and then
Thank you, Mr Chair. Question to yourselves and then through you, Mr Chair, question to council staff. Have you spoken with any other funders in Western Bay of Plenty community, or is this the first entity that you've come across? And the question to council staff is, what opportunities exist outside of an annual plan for grant funding?
So this is the first of 6 presentations that we've prepared. Yeah.
And to council staff?
I'm not specifically sure in relation to this type of activity, but we have a range of different grants that come up. The opportunity for grants come up throughout the year, so we can get that information and provide that to you. So,
Arthur Frontal.
Tautoko, what you're trying to do is a big issue. One of the things that happened with Rotorua when they were doing emergency accommodation was that as soon as the homeless throughout the country hear there's a place that's offering a good thing, they all swarm there. How do you deal with that?
Well, that is one issue. We weren't directly addressing just the homeless, so I guess the costs would put most of them off, and the fact that they can't smoke in them would probably discourage them.
Last question, I was going to make it from Councillor Taylor, but we'll see how quick he is, and we might have one more.
Thanks for the presentation, guys. Good to see you again, Ranui. Just a question. Rotorua tried to do something like this last month, I believe, and then it was sort of shut down by red tape. Have you had a look into that?
Yes. The difference between ours is that they're professionally made and they're safe and they're winterproof. The ones from our perspective in Rotorua look more like crate dog kennels. Yeah.
Last question, Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, I noticed your, under the budget, you've got 30% funding you're looking for from council grants, but it doesn't mention central government. Have you sort of talked at all with anyone around the potential for central government to have a role here? And in that context, I guess the 30% loans, can you just clarify how the loans are repaid? Like who pays what for those loans if you ended up going through with this?
Yeah, so I think key to the whole idea is that it's not just meant to be a handout. I think that's part of the questions here. There are conditions, and we've also, talked at depth internally around how someone who is homeless might access this, and then we would look at working with social, yes, with central government, to enable through MSD for people to be able to access this. They need to actually be achieving certain levels or certain standards. It's also a commercial opportunity, so it wouldn't just be we just build these things in CBDs or in parks for homeless people. This is a commercial viable option. Japan has got huge amounts of success with these types of sleep pods. I have a background in supply and import and manufacture out of China. So these sort of capsules are very highly and well made. So it is a mix. It's like, well, we're giving this premium product to people who may not appreciate it, but it's about, I think, a rising tide lifts all ships. And so I think the money that's attributed to people when they realize, hey, we want to lift you out of this experience here. It's not a place to stay. I mean, they can't live in these things, but they can actually feel appreciated. But to your point about government, wider government, we haven't actually approached that, but I think it's a great conversation.
Thank you very much. And just a quick one from me. The funding and the approval was one thing, but you're more interested in space to put them at this point, so you can actually conduct some sort of a trial or get started. So from council perspective, it's a place where you can actually put them to trial and to see if they're actually going to make a difference. Is that correct? Right. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Two great ideas.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Right. Moving along, acceptance of late items. There's no late items. No. Confidential business being transferred into the open. No. Change to the order of business. No. Confirmation of minutes of the City Future Committee held on the 16th of June. Any questions, comments? Do I have a mover to accept the minutes from the 16th of June? Councillor Taylor, happy to move. Councillor Baker, second. All those in favour? Aye. Those minutes are accepted. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone wish to declare any conflicts that may arise today? No? Right. General business. Item 9.1, status update of actions of prior City Future committees. Christine Jones, anything to comment on? No comment. Anyone have any comments on the current action list? No? Does anyone wish to move that these be accepted? Councillor Baker's happy to move. I'm happy to second. All those in favour? Aye. That is accepted. Item 9.2, page 25 on your agenda. Quarterly update growth, land use planning and transport strategy projects for August 2025. Christine Jones and Andy Mead to speak. Is he just going to let Andy do it, Christine, or you wish to introduce?
I'll kick off if that's
Thank you,
all
Andy.
right. Kia ora, good morning, everybody. This is on, right?
Yes.
Good. I'll just firstly quickly comment on two matters which are not in the cover report. Firstly, the matter of the TEL tolling proposal, which came up after the report was completed. So NZTA have commenced a tolling process, submission process, consultation with the community around adding a second tolling gantry on the TEL to the west, the Tauranga side of the Papamoa East Interchange, which we are constructing as TCC at this point in time. So the team, the staff, are putting together an assessment of that, and they will bring some key points or a draft submission to you informally for consideration before we get that approved and submitted to NZTA within the time frame for that. Just one point around that, we'd previously engaged with the NZTA around, I guess, the opportunity for some of that toll revenue to contribute to the Papamoa East interchange cost itself, the funding of that interchange, but that did not go anywhere at that point in time, so it's maybe a point we would consider raising again. Just secondly, and this is in the detailed attachment, where it talks about the commercial centres strategy, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention because we were proposing to commence targeted engagement with key organisations, so they would largely be the town centre owners or developers, for example at Bayfair or the Sands or Tauranga Crossing, Bethlehem, or the Main Street organisations, so that would be very targeted at this point. We're not talking about wider community engagement, but just to make sure there was a level of comfort with that or any concerns. So those were those 2 points. And if I just quickly make a few comments on the covering report, I think the most substantive issue in the report is the government announcements around the stopping of plan changes, moving forward into the new resource management system. So announcements have been made there largely to prevent councils from moving forward with plan changes under the RMA or full reviews of their district plans on the basis that the new planning system should be in place reasonably rapidly over the next few years, and it is more efficient, cost-effective to, I guess, focus resources on the new system rather than continue working under the RMA. This will affect a number of our projects, particularly some of our greenfield projects that we are structure planning and looking to rezone, like Keenan Road, and also our review of the commercial and industrial areas and zonings within the city. A lot of those projects and that background work on them can continue to move forward, but it's the implementation that would happen under the new system. There is, of course, the Tutumu urban growth area, which is perhaps a little bit further advanced than some of those other projects. And so we're still awaiting some further detail, which we expect this week or next, associated with the relevant RMA amendment bill, so that we can report back to you at an upcoming committee or council meeting after we've engaged further with the Tutumu landowners about if or how these announcements will affect that project and what the best way is to move that project forward so that it can get to a state where it's, I guess, plan-enabled, zone consented or what have you. There has been, and there is an action right from the beginning of the new council around looking to report back and potentially reassess the additional height around the Mount Maunganui town centre area. These plan stop announcements really mean that that's not an issue that we will have the ability to pick up at this point in time, because it would require a change to our district plan, our city plan, and it's something that could be reconsidered through the implementation of the new planning system and the work that leads into that, like the regional spatial plan. We also have, as an item on this agenda later on, our submission to the government's Going for Housing Growth consultation process, and that deals directly with intensification requirements and policy moving forward, and that will have some bearing on that issue as well. Just moving quickly through some other matters in terms of the Western Corridors, significant progress has been made there around consenting development agreements, and we are starting to get some further detail from NZTA around what their future State Highway 29 investments will look like in some more detail in terms of design, timing, etc., and the impact of potential for that to be tolled. And so we're just in a process of seeking some further information from NZTA so we can make a sound assessment of those matters to bring back to you in the first instance. We have, I guess, the ongoing Tutumu urban growth area, which I've spoken about today. There is a workshop this evening to talk about infrastructure and particularly wastewater, and a separate report, which is the next item on this agenda, so I won't get into that in any detail. In terms of the fast track proposals, we have had some informal discussion of those, so I think that's just worth mentioning in this committee environment that in particular with the Bell Road Wairaki South proposal, which is in the Western Bay district, but effectively on our doorstep and requiring connection to our infrastructure, particularly our potable water supply and transport networks, that raises a set of reasonably complex cross-boundary infrastructure and funding issues, which we are engaging collaboratively with the proponents of that development and the other councils involved, being Western Bay and the Regional Council, but there is quite some work to do on that over the next few months, and we anticipate that they will be lodging their consent applications with the Environment Protection Agency before the end of this calendar year. There are, of course, quite a number of challenges with our growth projects, our greenfield projects and associated infrastructure requirements. Just quickly mention that city regional deal process, which has already been mentioned this morning. certainly an opportunity for us to look to address some of that, and we're starting to work up, I guess, that next level of detail around what that might look like. Just lastly, in the cover report, there is some information around the new build dwelling survey that we do on an annual basis. So that survey looks at a whole lot of information, particularly around the cost of brand new dwellings that are being delivered to the market, which are being offered for sale, you know, through the usual channels, TradeMe, etc., but also on developers' websites. I think the key takeaway for me is since we've delivered Plan Change 33, we've had a significant uptick, particularly in terraced housing, and that terraced housing is delivering the most affordable new housing that we see in the city by quite some way. Probably a couple of $100,000 on average cheaper than standalone housing. So it's not necessarily affordable, truly affordable in the sense of what all our community can afford, but it's certainly moving things in the right direction. So I'll leave it there unless you've got any other points to add, Christine.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Regarding the announcement by the Minister, there is no ministerial power to issue a decree in terms of plan changes. We still are a nation of laws and require passage of an Act of Parliament, but he's just signalling that that's the government's intention, right?
Yes, so the government are moving through a Resource Management Amendment Act at the moment, which they intend to have enacted or passed by the end of this month, by the end of August. And so they're introducing a further amendment to that Act to legislate the plan stop announcements. Yeah, and that's where we're waiting for a little bit more detail on just exactly how that's drafted. Yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
Just a really quick one. The KO land at Tauriko, are they giving us an ETA on when they're going to actually decide on this?
So they're working through a process initially around what the other government department needs are around that land. So considering things like the future state highway investment, where they'll need a new corridor for the offline highway, it impacts that land. New schools are required in Tauriko West, so they're considering that. So that, I guess, is probably holding up the process of the residual land going to market. So, yeah, that's something that we'd probably see in the later half of this year.
I think the key thing that we were concerned about was around the funding, the agreements between KO and the other private landowners, and the linkage to the funding agreements with council, and those elements have already been resolved or are well underway to be resolved. So from our perspective, there aren't any major concerns which we had previously. They're being or are being addressed.
Those reasons are great reasons to hold it up. If we can get a school out of it or something, that's fantastic.
Councillor Crack.
Thank you. Regarding the plan stop, I read somewhere there is a potential for an exemption. And what is that? How easy is that? And yeah, a bit of detail around that opportunity.
Yeah, I guess that's where we're, again, awaiting a little bit more detail. But there's essentially two categories of exemptions. There would be exemptions that are as of right, so they'll be written into the legislation. So, for example, Christchurch and Auckland still need to work through their intensification plan changes and complete those. This is going all the way back to the medium density residential standards. They've got bespoke processes. So there will be some, there's some automatic exemptions there, and then there's going to be a process of being able to apply for exemptions for plan changes. So a council could apply. Largely it's going to be around matters that the government see are critical to their policy agenda, so issues like around natural hazard management or around large-scale housing supply. So there will be options, but we're going to need to consider whether that is the right option, because there are quite a number of other ways of moving projects forward, private plan changes, fast-track processes, or through the upcoming regional spatial plans and the new planning system.
Another question regarding tolling. Given the announcement by government to progress to an electronic RUC type system for all vehicles, doesn't that basically negate the need for tolling structures? I'm thinking of the proposed one at Bar East. Wouldn't that simply convert to the electronic RUC? And so if a user uses that stretch of road, then it's automatically an additional charge to the road user charge. Has that been discussed? Because it does seem a bit illogical to build tolling structures.
So at this point, our understanding is the NZTA are progressing with the tolling consultation, and at the conference where Minister Bishop announced that charging, he made it clear that there wasn't yet a date for private vehicles, so RUCs would transfer to the new system, but there was not yet a date for rollout for that system across the entire New Zealand vehicle fleet at this point in time.
Just to clarify, it's only intended to apply to the current RUC vehicles.
My understanding is it's intended to be staged, and stage 1 is the RUC vehicle. Yep.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Crowther?
Yeah, I had 3 questions around transport. One is, what is the Tauranga Strategic Urban Network Plan?
So is there a reference in here? I think I know what you're speaking about.
Under, what is it? Ohauiti Transport Plan.
Oh, right. Yeah. So this is an NZTA project. They're undertaking 2 kind of strategic investigations or assessments that involve Tauranga at the moment. One is the looking at effectively the Hamilton to Tauranga corridor, and the other is looking at the Tauranga urban network, particularly, so that's the state highway network within the Tauranga urban area and some of the other key roads that feed into that, like, so 15th Turret. So it's really an assessment of what the future form and investment needs are for that network.
To the Chief Executive or to our GM of Infrastructure, is that being integrated with the item we had presented on yesterday around the arterial route upgrades?
I can respond to that. Yeah, so thank you. Yes, it is true. The TSP is the connecting piece between the organisations and those respective pieces of work.
I think it'd be helpful if we could have a report at the Joint Transport Committee to understand that, because I think it sounds like a really critical piece of planning, and it's a huge gap in our understanding as elected members, I think, around how this all fits together. So I think it'd be really helpful, and then if necessary to this council as well, if that level of detail is wanted. But that'd be my suggestion through the chair.
Thank you. Yeah, we can pick that up as an action and make sure we close that gap up. Thanks.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Council. We'll just make sure that's added to the list of actions for us to deal with. Thank you, and welcome to the Mayor.
Second question was under the item on State Highway 2 revocation. It states agreeing the boundaries of what will become local road and what will remain state highway was a key issue, and also the agreeing an appropriate NZTA funding assistance rate moving forward to recognise additional traffic will remain on that road as a result of the tolling. So I guess what I'm wanting to find out is this something that we're kind of going to be waving the flag and crossing our fingers and hoping for something unusual that's not been done normally, or is there an established precedent that we are going into this with some confidence that we might get something different from just a normal local road with a normal fire rate?
Yeah, look, every revocation process is kind of unique and bespoke. Previously, I don't know when it was, within the last 10 years, Western Bay had quite a negotiation process with the NZTA around the Te Puke Highway when the TEL was being constructed, so we anticipate something similar here. We think there's some merit certainly to the issues that we're raising, but NZTA's position would begin with the fact that would want to revoke the full distance of that road. So we just need to work through that. That sort of process is being restarted now, and we've been very clear that our elected members are, I guess, the decision maker from our perspective. So there will be some further reporting to you.
Through the Chair, is there anything you can tell us about cases around the Bay of Plenty or New Zealand that have a different FAR rate for a revoked highway? Is there any example of a different FAR? So I haven't heard of one.
We would have to come back to you on that. We could add that one to the list as well.
I'm not trying to create, I'm just trying to sort of see, is that something that's known? If it's an unknown, that's fine. I'm happy for you just to not report back on that myself, but I guess it just seemed like it's an unusual request based on conversations I've had with NZTA, and I'm just wondering if we've got precedent here, or if we're just trying to be the first in the country to get a special FAR rate on this.
It is an unusual request, but we've got an unusual situation where TNL was designed to, because there was an identified need, and the toll level that has been put on it effectively means that state highway traffic will remain on the local road. So the local road will continue to provide a state highway function because of the toll level. And the toll modelling that was done, that we commented on through the tolling submission process, we made that point really clear. So we've just been consistent with what we've said is, therefore, that funding responsibility for wear and tear to our roading network, because it's carrying state highway traffic, should have a contribution. So we're saying that there's a special case here, and we're totally consistent with the points we've raised previously. And what we wanted to do here was to signal to you the types of issues that we're raising. And at the first instance, we'll discuss that at a staff level, but if we aren't able to successfully negotiate, that will absolutely be escalated, and final decisions always will sit with you. But we wanted you, if you had any sort of reaction or concern with any of these points that we're proposing to raise, we were keen to hear with it. Otherwise, we'll sort of take that as a bit of a mandate from you, and we'll get on with progressing this. And we do think there's good reason to try to do that.
There's certainly merit in pursuing an opportunity, and I think potentially, just off the cuff, is just what about approaching NZTA with a suggestion to have the first month or two toll-free in order to quantify the level of state highway traffic, because once that toll is then imposed, if it's delayed for a month or two, then you've got an accurate assessment or number of vehicles that are choosing not to use the state highway due to the toll, the new state highway due to the toll. And then that's substantive data used to actually pursue an enhanced FAR rate. Because otherwise, the argument would be, for instance, is that legitimate state highway traffic or not? And I'd certainly like to write to and somehow put a case to NZTA to actually undertake that assessment and delay the introduction of the toll and not do it on day one. Has that been done before, where they actually delay a toll, or it's always at day one?
Mix of things. So, I mean, there is if you think about the TEL, it will be opening, or one ramp will be opening without the toll. Normally you would negotiate this and finalise this prior to the opening of the road, but certainly that's something we can put on the table and be part of the negotiation discussion. So it's a good point we can pick up. But I think the other thing is too, the modelling generally is pretty reasonable, and we do check. They do a check subsequent to a road being open as to whether the modelling predictions were reasonably accurate or not. So we can work off that.
Was the modelling undertaken with the current toll the quantum of the current toll, proposed toll, or was it lower? So
yes, there was modelling with the toll levels, and we were provided that. So we asked for some of it, and some of it we received under Official Information Act request that we made to be able to make a better quality submission to the tolling consultation on TNL. So we do have some of that information.
Right, I have a couple of questions. Plan change 38's on page 31, business land framework. With this current stock plan, I'm quite keen to get this one around allowing businesses to shift from industrial to commercial. So with the planning stop, where does it leave this action around us being allowed our businesses to, when they're obviously in the wrong zone or the city's moved and changes, how can we transition them into a different zone?
Yeah, so it really leaves us in the position where we can do the background work and form some policy positions around those sort of matters, but not actually implement it until the new planning system is put in place.
Thanks for the answer, doesn't help much at all. Next one, Keenan Road City Deal, Region Deal, it's on page 27. Given that the Keenan Road development is primarily a housing development, and we're currently in this position, does it stop the development of the actual road itself, Kawerau Drive to State Highway 36?
So that project is not in our current LTP, so it would need to be prioritised. It doesn't have any sort of NZTA funding assistance. It doesn't stop the council if it wishes to progress that, doing that separately. No, you could do that if you wanted to.
Thank you. Do I have any more questions of staff? Councillor Rolleston.
Thank you. Just going down to page 27, 28 on those stats, got a couple of questions, or well, probably more comment, because the lowest value property I think is 550, which is Emerald Shores Lifestyle Village. So just making sure that there's not a lot of dwellings being sold in Emerald Shores that would basically screw that number. Because what I'm saying is if there's the lowest value is 550 and a dozen properties sold in there, that would probably have a big impact on the average value of property being sold. Do you know whether there's a number of those in the data? Because that's sort of probably outside of Plan 33.
No, we'd have to go back and have a look. How many were in Emerald Shores itself? I don't have that at hand, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just conscious that we could be going, well done, we've got this happening and we've got lower value properties, yet a handful of them were in the Emerald Shores and they were all worth 550 or 600,000. Having said that, there might be some in 2023 and 2024 that, but you know, I think you always got to be careful of just averages in data. So that's maybe something you can look into. I'm not expecting but I guess if there was a lot in there, I would be trying to probably balance that out. Although you have got some mediums and in there as well. But
Yeah,
just
sorry,
a question.
if I could comment, just so those won't be, those are standalone dwellings. So some of the further analysis has it broken down by dwelling type. And it's the attached dwellings, which are largely the two-storey, some three-storey terrace housing that's been built. So you can see on average that's delivering the lowest cost housing. So I think there is sufficient information in there to show, I guess, the positive impact that Plan Change 33 is having. But we can come back with some further information.
Yeah, I think the last bullet sort of says generally cheaper than they were 3 years ago. And it might be true, but I'm just making sure that those numbers aren't sort of skewed by one or a couple of developments. And my second question, Mr. Chair, is, you know, generally Māori land doesn't sell, Māori new houses on dwellings, and I think it's something that's been brought up in another forum, but do we capture the number of new dwellings on Māori land? Because it is a sort of, again, and hopefully around the affordability of it as well, because we're only capturing new builds on general land that are going to be sold.
So we do capture it through our broader, you know, work that we do to monitor growth, but we don't capture it through this survey. The survey is only about new build dwellings that have been offered to the market for sale, so where we've got that information around what the price of those dwellings is. So no, there's no ability to capture new builds on Maryland because we don't have the information around value. And as you know, they don't sell, so can't transact. Yeah.
Any more questions? Councillor Crowther.
Right. Yeah, just following up on Councillor Rolliston's point, I think it'd be helpful to see the same minimum, maximum medians for each of those categories. So if that could be an action point, I think that'd give us a far clearer idea, because when you look at the 26 duplexes at an average price of $948,000, which is, as you say, Andy, not affordable, and the definition of affordable that's used in New Zealand, it'd be interesting to know whether that average was bumped up by, 2 or 3 really expensive duplexes, or whether we're actually talking about most of them selling in the 900,000s. To me, that would be something we can't tell, along with all the other things that Councillor Rolliston raised. So the more granular we can get in each category, I think the better, and certainly medians are a much more helpful way of doing that.
So I think there in the report, I believe there's the link to the full survey. This is, of course, just a small snapshot. So I would say most probably that detail is already there, but if it's not, we're happy to provide it.
I haven't seen the report itself.
Yeah, the report's on our website.
Okay.
If the link is not, yeah, I don't think the link is shown here, so we can provide the link to that.
So can I leave that with you, Councillor Crowther? You'll check the link, check the report. If all the information's there, we'll leave it. But if it's not, can you come back to me with the action you want added to the list, and we'll leave it, and we'll add it on. Thank you.
It's still, my personal view is it would be good to have it in the report. Yeah.
So if it's on the report, which part of the report do you want it added to? The new dwellings for sale?
Just the same thing, categorised by each of the 3 categories: standalone, duplexes, and whatever the other
Attached dwellings, right. Add that on, please. Do I have any more questions for staff? That appears to be all the questions for staff. Thank you very much. Excellent report. Enjoyed reading. Can I have the recommendation on the screen, please, Anahita? It's a bit big for me to read out. Would anyone like to move that the City Futures Committee receives a report quarterly update, growth, land use, planning, transport, strategy projects for August 25? The rest I'll leave for you to read. Councillor Taylor, happy to move. Councillor Kulak is happy to second. Any discussion? Anyone wish to speak to it? Councillor Taylor.
Just acknowledge the report and the depth that it goes into. It's a great outline of where we're at. It also illustrates the issues that central government has caused us, and the workload is certainly a bit of a juggling act at the moment. So acknowledge the extra work that's probably given the staff to try and work within the rules that are currently a bit nebulous, I suppose you'd say.
Councillor Correct, you wish to speak?
No, but reinforce the views expressed by Councillor Taylor, not just this report, but all the reports. I'm just really impressed with the quality of work undertaken to put these reports together. It's just shows you the ability and the capability of the TCC staff that we've got here.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, I'd just like to support Councillor Kurak's comments around a trial, real-life trial of pre-tolls for the highway, TNL, and I guess I would support it on the basis that whilst modelling can be quite robust, it doesn't mean it's accurate. And we had a case with the B2B, Bay Park to Bayfair project, where partway through construction, the modelled number of vehicles going along that part of State Highway 2 was higher than the 2028 projection. So this was in about 2019, I believe it was, from memory, something around then. By the end of the project, it was over that projection for 2028. So I think it would be really interesting, given the time lag that's happened from the modelling for TNL, and there were some question marks around some of that stuff in the same way there were for the projections for the B2B. I think a real life sample for a couple of months would be fantastic, for a quarter or something. It might be a lack of funding for that time, but I think the robustness that would give would be really helpful, and it will potentially save council and government, a lot of time and negotiating, and someone's going to save money somewhere. Someone's going to pay for it. One of us will pay, but it's just a question of how to get that data. To me, I'd strongly support that.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Taylor's comments around we're sometimes at the mercy of central government, and when they change their minds, it has a lot of impact on us and how we go about our business. If there's no further comments, I'll put the motion to the floor. City Futures receives a quarterly update report. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 9.3. It's on page 47. Te Tumu wastewater servicing options. Nick Johansson, Kerry, Claudia and Wally. Nick, are you going to open? Oh, Claudia.
I'll just start with just a few background comments. So this report came from resolutions of the committee 2 or 3 meetings ago. We were asked to report back on transport access and alternative or other wastewater treatment or servicing options for the Te Tumu project, on the basis that the overall challenge to enabling development of Te Tumu to commence and be successful is the very high bulk infrastructure costs that are now associated with that project, which mean that the timing of expenditure does not sit within our current LTP period. And that's a problem that we're all trying to resolve. Just obviously mentioning that we also have a separate workshop this afternoon with the landowners to dive a little bit deeper in their thinking around the wastewater options, and they have presented ahead of that session a letter that I understand they wish to have tabled at the committee meeting today, which just sets out what they're looking to investigate. So I'll leave it there and hand over to Claudia, who is the expert.
Good morning. So in this paper, we provide an overview of the current strategy. And so the current strategy is really looking to provide wastewater servicing infrastructure for growth in Papamoa, the Rawaki area, which is already zoned and growth is happening there, and Te Tumu. So it's a really staged approach. And the current projects which are currently in design or being implemented, they are all needed for growth in Rawaki and Papamoa itself. So if Te Tumu is not happening, we wouldn't stop these projects. They are still required. And as part of the financial constraints for the last LTP, all projects which were not required for Rawaki and Papamoa right now to service the growth, and were more related to Te Tumu, we pushed out of the 10-year horizon. So there's just a little bit of planning budget to get us going towards the end of the the LTP. And yeah, before actually the strategy was developed, a range of options were assessed, also standalone options for servicing Te Tumu with their own treatment plant, also looking at sending the wastewater flows to the Te Puke treatment plant. And so the technology is there and also advanced further in the meantime. But a key concern was actually the discharge. Even treated wastewater is the preference from our Taonga Whenua partners actually not to go into fresh water, but to land. And yeah, and so that we already had a discharge points which had enough capacity at the time to actually cater for these flows. So that was a key consideration of it. What has changed since then is that actually the cost is actually much higher than we originally anticipated for this scheme. We also have got more development being proposed in the eastern area. So we have got now on the table also the fast-tracking proposal for Wairakei South, the Bell Road area, and also Smart Growth is indicating maybe in the future an eastern town. So we actually realized it's probably worthwhile to have another look. Can we actually do something different, and how would that stack up in regard to cost and other benefits as well? Yeah, one item I would like to point out, while the current projects can service the growth, with the additional growth from Te Tumu and the second rising mains, it had also a strong resilience component. So the current pipelines are in liquefiable land. So if we would have a big shake, we would really rely on this one pipeline and would be potentially quite difficult to repair. So we also build that into the scheme for more resilience going forward. So was good thinking actually done behind that whole scheme. But yeah, so in this paper, we also outlined the different options we want to look at, which includes a standalone option for Te Tumu or together with the Wairakei South area. And we are very happy to work with the developers on this and take their proposals on board. So if we get the information and they started to send us information through, we can work with that in our assessment as well. And really make sure that we're getting value for money, that it stacks up from an environmental perspective, from a cost perspective, and yeah, also going forward, there will have to be discussions with Tangaroa Whenua, also depending on where the potential discharge might be, how they would feel about kind of a new discharge point. So that's probably a very tricky one, which need to be discussed. Yeah. So that's an introduction. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for that, and very well written report. Enjoyed reading it. Questions for staff? Mayor Mahe.
Thank you for the presentation and the report. I've got a couple of questions. So I guess around doing things differently, if you look at the costs, the rising main is a significant portion of the total, and I hear what you say around resilience, etc. But what we've got in the ground at the moment, and obviously upgrading Opal Drive, etc. What capacity do we have there? Is that all going to be used by Wairakei and Papamoa East?
Yes, and so the design of the current rising mains and the upgrades to Opal Drive pump station, also the additional storage, so there's only a certain amount of space we can use for storage at the treatment plant, would all be needed for the Wairakei and Papamoa growth, basically.
Okay,
and of course, we would look at additional optimizing that scheme going forward. We would also look at storage in Te Tumu itself to minimize pipe sizes, etc.
Yeah. So is there a world where we could, for example, just what you're talking about there around storing it? Because I'm sure we're not using 100% capacity 100% of the time, with our current wastewater system. So is there a world where we could, have big storage tanks and be pumping when we have capacity? I know one of the assessed options was trucking it. So, obviously we've looked at that sort of, that storage option. So it seems like a good way we can use our current infrastructure without, I think it's around $200 million that we're going to spend to build a new rising main.
Yeah, so storage, so there are two different parts of storage. One part is for an emergency, so if there's something happening at the pump station, we always need a certain amount of storage where we can just store it for a certain amount of time, so we're not having directly overflows while we're trying to fix it. But then we also have got operational storage, and we try to maximize the amount of space we have at like Opal Drive pump station to use that space for storage. So we are not pumping all the peak flows, but actually while we have got peaks, we store it. And so we actually try to maximize the pumping or optimize the pumping, so we are actually utilizing the infrastructure on a continuous basis and not just during peak times. So that is part of the whole design and achieving the best value for infrastructure.
So there's not.
So it's already built into the scheme, yeah.
So there's not a world where we could service Te Timo with our current infrastructure. We have to build a rising main. There's no way around that.
Yeah, there's no way around it.
Okay.
Dedicated to Te Manga.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. And then I guess the next questions is just around some of the, I think if we look at the table on page 51, so there was just some questions around some of these projects, and it probably applies to pretty much all these projects. If there was an alternative wastewater solution delivered at Te Timo, which of these projects no longer are needed?
So these are the ones, without then having any resilience or doing something else. There is the Te Tumu rising main, which would fall out. And then the following ones are Waiwaki rising main and the stage 2 and the Opal Drive to Te Manga one. So these are the ones which are earmarked as planning. So the ones which are earmarked in design or in construction, they are still needed. Yeah, the bottom three basically.
So that's about it's about 150 million-ish of that would potentially drop out if.
It's a bit more. It's
okay. So
100, 180.
Yeah, it would
so
be
these
good.
are the last three. So that's 97 million. That's nearly 100 plus 180 and 40. So 220 roundabout.
Would drop out if we didn't have Te Timo.
Yeah, but then you would have other costs.
Yeah.
So these are all also developer reimbursed. So that's.
Yeah. Well, it'd be good. It would be good if we could maybe as an action just get that information, like assuming that it's delivered in an alternative way, and not exactly what costs would come out, and then obviously there's going to be some that we may need in there for growth or whatever through the Wairaki to Temu, just so we know what we're talking about. And then I guess that was kind of going into my next question, which is where we've got this Opal Drive, for example, which is the Opal Drive to Te Manga rising main, 97 million. So what would the trigger be for that?
Any additional growth, basically. So we really so with the current projects underway and through the existing rising mains, we can cater what is currently zoned in Papamoa and Waiwaki. So if we've got any additional growth which should go into this scheme, that triggers the second rising main.
So Claudia, the assumption is that rising main needs to be in place for the first house to be built in Te Tumu, correct? More or less.
More or less, yeah. So there's
Maybe
maybe
the
some
third house,
leverage
yeah.
because there might not be a full build-out of Waiwaki, but yeah, it should be pretty much being built. You don't want to have half of Te Tumu being built out before.
Yeah, I think we just need to be very careful that we don't go and do a project that we're, that we don't need to do if there's an alternative. It's just being very careful around that. I just have two other questions quickly. So the first one is applies to 21 on page 52, 53. And we're just talking about, I guess the risks of consenting, etc. Is that likely to to diminish through the new RMA?
It should make it slightly easier from our discussion with the regional council, as there are certain standards for certain contaminants, but there are also other contaminants which are not covered by the new standards, and it also doesn't take away our requirement to engage with Tangata Whenua on this project.
All right, no, that's great. And then final question, and it might be a bit of work to do, I'm not sure, but if we had an alternative solution into Timu, how does that affect what we've already built, and getting that back through development contributions? So getting that quantified, would be good. What in the system would we've already built or is being built that we're assuming is Te Timu's going to contribute to that when we wouldn't get back? So it'd be good to have that as a...
Yeah, we don't have the information in this report, but we more or less have it at hand. There certainly is some Te Tumu share of projects like the Opal Drive pump station, so we'll come back to that.
Yeah,
that'd
be great, just so we understand the ramifications. Thank you very much.
And
that's all.
Maybe just in addition to the cost implication, there is also the concern about the resilience component, which I mentioned earlier, that there would be only rising mains within liquefiable land in the coastal area. So it's a large population we are servicing with one pipeline in questionable land. So that's just a resilience question.
Thank you.
So just so we're clear, Mayor, there's 3 actions you want there. The resilience of the system, how much of it's resilience-based.
Yeah.
The impact costs associated with Te Timu if they choose a different wastewater processing system, and the other one is how much DCs are we depending on or may in the future require to complete the wastewater network.
Yes. I guess just that
impact.
What does not have to happen if we had a different...
And what drops out if the Te Timu landowners or developers change approach. Yeah. Did you get all that? Yep. Thank you. There's quite a bit in there. Councillor Crowther, then Arthur.
I can answer one of those questions now if you like. So we have the information just at hand. I'll send it out separately as well. But there's, in terms of the wastewater projects that would be required anyway, so 3 of them have a Te Tumu cost share. The main Wairaki pump station, which has that would be required anyway. Yep. That is a $31 million Te Tumu cost share. But obviously that project is a future project, so potentially could be rescoped.
It's under design.
Yeah, okay, that's well progressed. The Opal Drive pump station has a $16 million Te Tumu cost share. And the Wairaki Rising Main Phase 1 has a $2 million Te Tumu cost share. So in total, that's close to $50 million. We'll send that separately.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's really helpful. I think that's where we just got to be very careful when we're doing these projects that we, are all, we're not committing to things that we potentially don't need if Te Timu were to be serviced elsewhere. So that's that hard bit of where we have to commit early, but also we just need to be aware so we're not building infrastructure that we potentially don't need.
I believe Councillor Crowther's first, and then Arthur Flintoff, and then Councillor Morris.
I'll just reinforce what the Mayor has said. I'd be very interested in marginal costs, not just for Te Tumu, but also for Wairaki South, just so we can always see things presented on a marginal basis. So if we left Western Bay of Plenty to sort that one out, what would that look like? If we come to the party, what would it look like then, so that we get very clear numbers around that? So I think that'd be really helpful to have that. I don't know how you can lay it out easily, but a sort of a matrix with all those things, including, I guess, the Eastern Town would be another factor, although that's a big unknown. Yeah. But my question is around the reference under 8, where it talks about new possibilities, including local small-scale wastewater treatment plants within Te Tumu. I'm just wanting to do a bit of a reality check on what's come through in submissions to council over a number of years into smart growth strategies and so forth around very localised, very small scale. So, you know, grey water systems and compost toilets, you know, all basically across the whole range of things. Is there scope to scale that in terms of a financial incentive to do things like that, or are sort of other factors such as you know, the health and safety issues and so forth, do they kind of make that too big a barrier to do it at council scale level?
Yeah, I think one issue we have with these type of schemes is they are require a lot of commitment from homeowners, and not everybody is really up for that. And normally developers are not keen to rely on composting toilets in a new subdivision. So if you are making the lifestyle choice to go and live somewhere more rural, then that might be acceptable, but normally people are not necessarily keen to go into a new build subdivision.
I guess I was just looking at not as certainly not a compulsory kind of regime, but I'm just thinking in terms of if there were pockets of development in potentially anywhere, is there scope to kind of give, if the cost per property is, say, you know, $50,000, that there can be a choice for the developer to go, well, I can either sell the house for, you know, $900,000 or $850,000, plus you have to buy into the whole concept of grey water and various things. And, you know, I guess that's the issue, is because I know it keeps coming through from well-intended submissions, and it's whether that's even worth a conversation to have that sort of on-site appropriate.
The complication with the scheme would be that we would only now very late where we would have such an uptake, and we probably could not include that in our planning. So the cost of building the bulk infrastructure would still be the same, but we then wouldn't fully potentially utilize if there would be a large uptake. So it's very tricky actually to have that commitment. You need to have that commitment up front. Yeah.
Commitment up front from the developer.
Yeah, there are probably also some other implications. So we had maybe private developments in the past where developers had their own scheme, basically, but then people moved in and realized, oh, this is not really what I want, and then council had to come back and retrofit a standard solution, which ended up being much more costly. So it would be a very, very big risk.
Arthur, did you have a question? Can you please?
I have previously declared a conflict of interest around Te Tumu, but the chair has asked for my expert advice in regard, especially regarding this decentralised, Te Tumu decentralised wastewater option. I've got actually 4 questions, but one I suspect will be answered in due course. So the other 3 I have here, in this document here, it says supporting culturally aligned practices. What are they? In this separate one, yes.
We'll cover more of that tonight, but it's more to enlighten your questions.
Oh, yeah.
Just ask questions relevant to what's in the report.
Right, in this report.
Yeah. And the report's online, thank you.
I know.
Councillor Kurek.
Thank you. The workshop this afternoon, so that is 100% focused on the wastewater solution. Yep. Just clarify, is there any? Yep. Cool.
Councillor Schuler.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really appreciate this report, and just interesting on the table, and really good to see the sort of the breakdown of what makes up the project. So on that paragraph 19 there, base costs, and then, you know, the risk, optimism, bias and contingency, and I think you've explained a bit of it, but just in terms of, you know, so we're looking at, say, an $18 million project, which is say, a $12 million project plus $6 million of risk. Can you just sort of talk through some of those, particularly around the risk and the optimism bias, or sort of what are the things that factor into that? It's good to see.
Yes, so when we are starting off with a new project, and we don't know really much about the project, we have usually quite high risk and optimism bias, and risk can be a ground condition, something we identify, or just a general percentage, because we simply don't know. As we then progress through our planning steps, from feasibility, looking at different options, to prelim design, detail design, and then construction cost, we are refining the cost. So the optimism bias comes down to 0, and we have got at the end a crone. There might be still a bit of contingency, because there always could happen something, but that's a reduction. But right in the beginning, we, like if we have got a new project, we haven't done much work on, we put in the LTP, it might be even up to 60%.
Yeah, I've just got one quick one, mainly around the Wairaki township, the commercial areas that's being built. Obviously, when you're developing or planning, houses are quite straightforward, where there are 3 regions where you can get an occupancy and a usage and a particular wastewater. But how do you go about that for a commercial centre? Because you're not 100% sure what's going to be in there, whether it's high retail shopping or just commercial, industrial. How do you get a rough rule of thumb for how much capacity you need in a commercial area?
So for commercial industrial areas, we have got some general numbers we are using for our planning. And these numbers are written down in the IDC as well. So the local infrastructure from what the developers are building is built in line with that. And we are monitoring our network. So we can also update our numbers going forward. And especially for large infrastructure, we sometimes adjust, for good reasons, the amount of storage we use.
It was more like thinking the difference between a commercial retail shop and a car wash and the amount of water. Councillor Rolleston.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the tangata whenua engagement, can you sort of elaborate a little bit more, Natha might, around who we're engaging with, because it's an interesting piece of land out there, and for somebody who whakapapas to Te Arawa and to Ngāi Te Rangi, and of course it's a hell of a significant site, as we all know. Who are we engaging with, and at what level, I suppose, and understanding that the owners of the land are somewhat related but quite distinct from the iwi as such. So I know it's a tough question, but just for my purposes and for just to get an indication of who we're talking to.
Yeah, so just to clarify, your question is about the broader Tutumu project, not this wastewater work stream. I'll let Brad come up and answer that question. So Brad Bellamy is our lead planner on the Tutumu project.
Kia ora. So for the Tutumu project itself, you're absolutely right. There is a wide range. There's around 13 different iwi hapu who have expressed interest in Tutumu. Mixture of both Te Arawa and Tauranga Moana. So there are 3 dominant iwi authority that we're connecting with from Te Arawa, Unuku Pako, Rangatearere, Rangawewehi. And then also then Tapuika, Wataha, and there's a number of others. So for the project itself, the tangata whenua engagement has been on pause for a long time. There was a working party established some years ago when the project first started. However, through the some of the issues through some of the Māori land, that working party was paused at the request of tangata whenua. And at the moment, we're going through a process of seeking to restart that in some form, and that's just an ongoing process at the moment. And it's more an introductory sort of back to the project, because there's a number of new faces that we're speaking to from those iwi authority and various hapu.
The question, are we speaking to them individually, or is there any collective we're actually working with?
So that is one of the key questions we're putting to them as to whether they would like to restart something like that working party that was done originally, or whether they would like to still think about that or approach one individually at the moment. So there is an appetite growing in terms of coming together again as a group. So we're looking to try and facilitate with that where we can moving forward.
Sorry, one was more related question, Chair. So is there anything that includes the owners of the land? And is that the thinking?
Yep, so at the same process of talking to iwi Authority is also the land trusts themselves, and it's the same conversations have been having as to whether they would like to be approached as trustees and landowners, or whether they would like to come together as a group as well. So they're the same conversations being had by both.
Councillor Morris, you waved me off once.
I'm waving off, you take off again. A question probably requires some sort of determination from the Waitangi Tribunal or the Supreme Court, but I'm just wondering, in terms of Tauranga City Council policy, how do we relate when mana whenua may be wearing two hats? For example, out in the Te Tumu area, we've got mana whenua who are exercising kaitiakitanga and maybe kawanatanga in terms of their relationship with the land out there. But then we also have mana whenua acting...
Excuse me, Councillor, is there a question relative to the report, or we're going to...
100% relative to the report, yeah. Related to... Now, sorry, thanks for the interruption. I'll just reiterate where I started for clarity, because it's important when we're talking about relationships that we're clear. So when mana whenua are acting as kaitiaki or in a kawanatanga space as mana whenua, the relationship with the land, but also when mana whenua are acting as a business enterprise in competition, perhaps, as an enterprise with other developers in an area, how does council separate mana whenua's position as mana whenua versus mana whenua incorporated? So if there's a business interest, because some of the people will be wearing the same hats, and sometimes trustees will be the same. So how does council in its role then relate? Because mana whenua have in New Zealand's planning system, have a very strong role. So how do we manage that potential conflict of interest?
I'll kick it off, and Christine might add some comments as well. But just to keep it very simple, the Te Tumu project is a partnership between TCC and the main Te Tumu landowners in terms of moving forward with the structure plan and the rezoning we were anticipating under the RMA, which is a little uncertain. So one of those key landowners is the TK14 Murray Land Trust, with its roughly 5,000 beneficial owners. So we engage with them as a landowner. And the other large Murray Land block there in Te Tumu, the 8B1 block, they're not actually part of our relationship agreement, but they are more informally involved through that same sort of process. So we distinguish there versus, as Brad spoke about, the tangata whenua engagement at a iwi and hapu level. So we involve both, but separately in the project through those sort of mechanisms. Christine, I'll let you add to that if you like.
Yeah, just to echo what Andy said, and I think the other thing is that tangata whenua are very clear about which hat they're wearing. So when they are wearing their mana whenua hat, it is about representing iwi and hapu and their rights in that respect. And when they are in a landowner capacity, they are wearing their landowner hat. Sometimes it's exactly the same person, but we're really clear about in which capacity that we are engaging and speaking with them on, and we have quite different engagement plans depending on, are we engaging with them as mana whenua or are we engaging them as a landowner? So I think we've sort of developed that understanding over many years of working with tangata whenua and with landowners, and it seems to be
a effective functioning relationship, and we're not getting feedback that we haven't got that bit right, and we've got other bits that we need to improve on. Certainly in terms of relationship, I think that's split. We've got a good understanding between the parties.
Any more questions for staff? Does not appear to be any more questions for staff. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Excellent report. Before we move the motion, is there any comments amongst ourselves in relation to this? Mayor?
Yeah, I think just backing up some of the comments I've made, I think when we're looking at these growth projects, it's a very tough balance that we've got to get between building the infrastructure that's required to open them, but not building infrastructure that potentially is going to get stranded. So, yeah, I think we're just got to be very aware of that if we're looking at alternative wastewater solutions, that we're aware of that when we're doing that, and we're not going and spending $220 million for a system that's never going to get used. So, that's just that, I guess, scheduling and making sure that we are aware. Obviously, there's other options around some of that stranded cost, but this is one of the big issues we have as a council, and why our debt levels are so high is trying to get this balance right. And when we build things, we just need to make sure that they are going to actually be used by that growth, and looking to enable and get those that money back through DCs.
Any other comments before I put the motion to the floor? Right, we have a motion on the... I'm about to ask that. Would anyone be willing to move? The Mayor is happy to move. Councillor Morris is happy to second. Mayor, any further comments? Councillor Morris, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you. Briefly, thank you for the paper, and I just want to acknowledge the both the written and the verbal discussion around the willingness to work with developers proactively on potential changes to solutions for wastewater, and echo the Mayor's comments earlier around seeking value for money. And it's always hard to seek value for money in intergenerational projects when long pipelines are perhaps required and then may not be required depending on technology change, and then may still be required. You never know. So it's a difficult one.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion? No, my only comments is this has been on the council books for years, decades, and it's an illustration of trying to plan for something that we're always ready to do, but we never quite get started. And I've done some quick maths on some of the where we could be had we started this nearly 15 years ago. We would have been in a lot different place, but we're not there. We're where we are now, and we've got to make our decisions on where we are today. If there's no other comments, I'll put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? Against? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. And before we move on to the next item, item 9.4, we will adjourn for a 10-minute break. Let's see everyone back here at 11:15. Thank you and welcome back. We'll continue with the City Futures Committee meeting. We are at item 9.4, wastewater planning. It's on page 59. Nick, Claudia, Peter, welcome along. The floor is yours.
So this is a regular update we are doing on a quarterly basis. And yeah, so I just want to point out some specific points. So this year we are starting with the new LTP planning. So that looks pretty early, but we have to get new population numbers. We have to update our models. So there might be some changes in timing of projects, or new projects might being identified. So that piece of work is happening for us over the next couple of months. So we are then ready next year to put that into the next LTP or whatever service plan that might look like for our waters. Yeah, and when projects are being identified on a high level, we then take them the first step through a feasibility where we look at different options. And so the costs are being assessed, all range of different other criteria are being assessed, so it's a multi-criteria analysis to really try to achieve the best option and value for money for each project. And lately, we also got more earlier contractor involvement in some of our projects, and that was actually quite good value because some of the project costs actually went down a couple of million. So by actually taking the planning a little bit further, we can achieve quite good savings. So in this report, just a few highlights of progress. The water supply reconsenting project, so the technical work has largely been finalized, and we are now working on the assessment of environmental effects and the consent application itself. So we are on track to be able to launch that in March next year. We did all the feasibility work for the Mount Maunganui Totara Street water supply main upgrade, and that project can now go into design and can be handed over to the delivery team. And the Waimapu catchment management plan, where we received funding from the Ministry for the Environment, and we did together with Ngāti Huahine, that plan has been basically finalized in time with the ending of the funding, and we will report back on that one at a later time in a summary document, which will also be published. Yeah, these are some of the highlights, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kurek.
Thank you, Claudia, particularly for pointing out the savings in some of those projects. Some rubber meeting the road, and our messages that we continually send. It's certainly music to our ears. On page 61, 24, you referred to it earlier, the Totara Street project. Do you anticipate much traffic disruption with that project, and what's the anticipated timing of the actual work? The work's been undertaken. Totara Street.
Yeah, so that project will be delivered in 2 stages. So there's a first stage, which so next year will be still design, and then it goes the following year into construction. And it will be mainly in the berm, so we try to avoid the high traffic interruptions there. But yeah, that was a core consideration when we looked at the different options as well. How could we actually deliver that project?
So, sorry, are you saying there'll be minimal traffic disruption?
Yes, so it will be in the berm at the side, so we don't have to do road closures. Yeah, but there's always, of course, a little bit potentially where people might have to go a bit slower or something like that, yeah. But that's a detail which need to be developed in the next level of design.
Councillor Baker.
Morena Korua. Thank you for the report. Just on the water take reconsenting, so 11 through to 13, Oropi water take expires next year, and we had an annual plan submission from tangata whenua and landowners via Des Heke Kaiwha around the water take, concern around the water take land return, I think, and something to that effect. How are we progressing those conversations in tandem with this body of work, if at all?
Yeah, so the consenting of this project, we are taking that forward regardless, despite these discussions. And he pointed out a few times, but this hasn't been appointed as part of the core working group. So we have got representatives from the core Hapu and iwi groups, and we are working with them. So we are really taking them along the journey, that they have seen all the information up front and the technical reports, and they are currently preparing their CIAs. So we are partly waiting still for that. Yes, so but this is not hasn't been a part of the core working group. But I know that he has got these concerns from the past when the land was kind of referred back, to council to look after. And I think his key concerns, he mentioned to me, were kind of more access, that he would like to see more access to it. But it's not necessarily directly related to the take itself, that he has got concerns about the take. So at least I haven't had the discussion with him on that.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. I've got three questions. One is the feasibility study for Cameron Road, stormwater. Do we have an indicative price for what ballpark cost that's going to be to council?
Yes, but I would have to come back to you on that. I don't have it back of my mind.
Thank you. Second one is, can you just clarify the Cherrywood Shops stormwater, what that's setting out to do?
Yeah, so it's very early stages, but we know around the Cherrywood Shops there's an intensification area earmarked as part of Plan Change 33. And we know that there are also areas of flooding. So what we are looking into is alleviating some of the flooding on these properties, so it becomes easier for them to develop, and potentially just concentrating the flows along the road and dedicated flow path.
So that will be funded from general rates? That's not from a stormwater fund or from a DC funding, is that correct?
That is correct. At the moment, these stormwater projects are from general rates. In the past, there were some attempts to see if we could require development contributions, but it was quite complex. And then the discussion around the new water entity came up, and so that was parked for the time being.
I'd like an action point on that being considered as for DC funding. I'm struggling to see why we wouldn't, seeing it's for development. So it'd be good to understand at some point what the thinking is around that. I know it's an easy way out if we're doing a water entity, but it would be good to do that while we've got control, I would think. My third question is in regard, it's sort of picking up what Arthur raised earlier in a different context, but broadening it, which is the culturally appropriate disposal of wastewater. And like I've read our draft wastewater strategy summary document. I've looked a bit at the bigger one, but not much. But I'm just really wanting like a kind of layperson understanding of when we talk about all the good words, like the sustainable, resilient, culturally appropriate, all that stuff sounds great. And but then I talk to contacts in the Mana Whenua community, and I get the impression they don't think it's culturally appropriate or sustainable. I have question marks around it, and I sort of go, when we're sort of saying how it will be managed in the future, and it lists a bunch of things, so if people haven't read it, integrated planning, operational impacts of climate change, et cetera, all that stuff, that's all fine, but I guess what's missing here is any thinking like, are we going to keep trucking solid waste across the Kaimai to a landfill? Are we going to keep disposing of liquid into the ocean? We hear not streams earlier today in our report, but is that the plan for, say, the next 100 years, is to sort of keep doing it the way we're doing it? Or is there something when we read these words around sustainable, resilient, culturally appropriate, that am I missing that somewhere in here there's some explanation of what we'd do differently to what we're doing now?
Maybe in order to try to put more sense to what practically some of this means is we are, like in regard to climate change, we are looking at the additional rainfall we might receive, more drought periods. So that is a core consideration, changing climate in our planning. When we have got different options on the table for delivering an infrastructure project, we also look at the carbon emissions of it. So we are doing assessment of the inbuilt carbon, how much concrete we are using, and that is being built into the decision making as well. So it's quite practical application of trying to minimize our greenhouse gas emissions. And also the operational, there's another team who specifically looks at our current operational carbon emissions around the treatment plants. Are there any aspects where we can actually improve to reduce that? And in regard to cultural appropriateness, so from our perspective, we are engaged with Taonga Whenua quite a lot on all of these different projects, and really are seeking their feedback on these projects. So they are involved, and it's to a large degree not up to us to say what's appropriate for them, but that they tell us that this is appropriate.
Can I do a quick follow-up? I guess I think it's been made clear from some iwi leaders in past years that I've heard speaking to council that they don't like truckloads of whatever word was used going over the Kaimai. I guess that's the kind of level I'm looking at, because if you're talking about low carbon, culturally appropriate, something like a appropriate vermicast system or something of that nature is obviously more sustainable in that sense, more low carbon, more culturally appropriate if it's done in the right way. But there are downsides, and you've outlined the scalability, there's health and safety issues if people don't manage it appropriately. So I can understand from a council point of view there's major considerations here, but I guess it's just trying to understand when we use a languaging which I guess gives some hope for something different. All the plans are for the same old, and I'm just trying to see, is there anything different in the infrastructure strategy that would lead to a different type of infrastructure other than future-proof, climate-resilient infrastructure?
Yeah. So,
yeah, excuse me, Claudia, I think Nick wants to have a go at this one.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And Claudia, I'll give you the opportunity to add some detail to this. But we're not alone in this fight for getting it right. And these are conversations that are being had in every city around the country. And I was involved with similar work in the Wellington region probably a decade or more ago, where these exact conversations were had, and technological advancements are happening continuously. And I can't remember the exact percentage from the top of my head, but we actually do cart, if any, very little over the Kaimais at the moment. And Radley is at the back here. I think we're close to 100% now in keeping solids out of landfill. And that's something that, an improvement that we've developed over the last half a dozen years or so. So there are big improvements happening in that space all the time. So I just wanted to comment on that specific aspect, because it's actually not happening at the moment, that carting it over the Kaimais. And also the criteria that we mention here that we are considering, and it all sounds really good as you read them out, they are all considerations when we go through multi-criteria assessments. Because we consider them doesn't mean we get them all 100% right. There are always going to be compromises, and that's the fact of the matter. Some of it we will get 100% right eventually, and I think the solids out of wastewater treatment now is one of those where we've actually, we're there or thereabouts. And that happens across the board on all of those criteria. But yes, I agree. It sounds very pretty when you line them up like that. But that's not to say that we're perfect on all of them. They're in infrastructure and service provision, public service, there are always compromises to be made, but also great progress being made continuously, which I think is worth calling out. Thank you.
Do you wish to add to that, Claudia?
No, I just wanted to point out that everything goes to vermicomposting. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Crowther, just a clarification on your action point. We were discussing stormwater, then you said Cherrywood, DCs versus general rate. Is that for the plan or the study phase, not for the actual making this flow path? This is for studying flow paths and overland flow path.
The direction we're heading in terms of the funding of whatever needs to be done.
This is how we do studies for stormwater flow path, not for actually how we actually physically handle it. There's a bit of a difference between...
Yeah, I'm not so worried about the study. I was meaning once, if we're heading, and maybe I should have been clearer in my question on that. So I'm just sort of looking at how ultimately, because this will be the start, the start of the Automoto ones probably, and then there'll be all the other ones.
Yeah, they'll all come off that, yeah.
Always happening.
So this is just the initial, how we do the study for how we're going to fund and pay for this flow path. So it's where the money comes from for how we learn about it versus how we actually deal with it. Yeah. Do you have any more questions? Arthur?
I have a question about this Kaituna overflow proposal in here. You're looking at, it says that to divert the overflow through the Wairaki to Tumu, a spillway, just like the Wairaki, I imagine. I'm just thinking though, I've seen that Kaituna, and I was in Rotorua just to see the lakes come up, and that Kaituna is really full. Isn't the strategy like last minute of dealing with that stormwater rise at Te Tumu? Is there other mitigation or strategies further in? I mean, once you combine this with high tide and all that sort of stuff, it has the potential to flood through Te Tumu.
So our study showed that it still would work. And so what is actually happening, that the Wairaki stream itself doesn't have its natural outlet anymore. So for the main flows on a day-to-day basis and even up to the 7-year event would actually be stored within the development itself. But eventually these flows are coming so high, if you talk, for example, a 100-year event, that we need to have a place where it safely can get out of the development area. And in the past, different options were looked at, and we re-looked at various options and locations, and kind of are currently confirming where this discharge location should be. And there's the Kaituna will overflow at certain points, or will have big flows, but the flow from the development can still come out. And potentially, this flow is also coming at a different time. So because it's at the bottom, it might actually flow out first before the flows all the way from up Rotorua are coming down. So the discharge actually disappears before the big wave from the bigger catchment is coming.
Just add a little bit further about the planning for Te Tumu in terms of, I've just pulled that out, so that's probably not good. But in terms of dealing with the flood that comes down the Kaituna River, so we've undertaken significant flood modelling to determine what the minimum ground level should be in Te Tumu, so it doesn't get flooded from the river itself, and then free borders added to that. We typically look at a 100-year flood event plus climate change effects. The Regional Council hold a very sophisticated model of the river dynamics.
Councillor Olliston.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions, if I may. Pretty quick ones, I think. On 13, if you could probably just share the makeup, probably relates to Councillor Baker's partai around DES, and there's a working group set up, so if we could be made aware of who the working group is, not more, it could just be shared with this rather than necessarily naming them today. It's over to you if you do, but I think just more an FYI, if that's okay. And the second question relates to 21, I think it is, around the reservoir or Mawao. Sorry, I should be talking into here. I'm assuming, well, related to the question, we're working with the Mawao Trust on that. And is it an and? So we're saying that we're looking for potential locations. If we found a potential location, would it be instead of, or would it be an and would keep the one on, would it depend on where we found what we found?
What I know, what's incorporated in the report is that in addition to.
Yeah.
So we're needing further storage within the coastal strip. So plan A would be to maintain the existing reservoir on Mawao itself. We have historically worked, we brought this to the trust. We need to do some further work and bring it back to the trust again. But the original provision was that there was allowance in the management plan to allow us to at least do maintenance and pretty much put like for like in terms of storage. But so, yeah, to answer your question, there's additional storage required.
Arthur Frontoff.
Oh, just for clarification, the reservoir on Mangatawa, is that taking the water that's coming through from the Waiari?
It can take water either from our Joyce Road plant, but we are currently able to feed some of the Waiari water to Mangatawa as well.
Any further questions? I have just one, paragraph 11, talking about the water consenting process. Given the changes happening in the resource management area, are we anticipating any delays in the legislation, or will the water consenting go through unaffected by the resource management changes in the Act?
So, because we should lodge by next March, there are probably not many changes which will be operative by then. And we have to lodge under the regional plan, which also would have to be changed earlier. So that it's very unlikely that we would lodge under that. But then depending on what's coming out, it might have some implications of the processing of the consent. But first we're preparing it like we have to do under the current plan.
Yeah, again, it's just one of the central government changing the rules, and it's how much extra time and money that we have to spend complying with them, and your valuable time as well. Yeah, no. If there are no more questions, thank you very much, staff. Well written report. Any general discussion? Can we have the recommendation? Oh, sorry, Councillor Crowther.
I'd like to say thanks to staff and to Nick, just especially a thank you for your answer. It's very encouraging to hear. I hadn't been aware of quite this. I knew we were doing some good work in that space, but it's incredibly satisfying to know that, because I know it's been a big issue raised years ago. So I do think maybe, I'd be interested in what Mayor Thalien's view was from Mana Whenua and that part of the bay. But I think it's definitely making good progress. I just wanted to sort of thank you for that comprehensive answer.
Right, we have a recommendation that the City Futures Committee receives a report Waters Planning Update. Does anyone wish to move the recommendation? Councillor Crowther's happy to move. I am happy to second that. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Crowther? No. I have nothing further to say. Anyone else wish to make a comment? Therefore, put the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour say aye. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 9.5, submission on phase 2 of the resource management reforms going for housing growth. This is on page 69 of your agenda. Is Christine, Andy, Cole, who's going to speak to this first? Andy's to speak first. Thank you, Andy. Welcome.
I can probably just speak to it. We've got Carl and Ashley here who've worked on a lot of the content to answer any questions if they do get a bit technical. But I'll just give a quick introduction. So this submission is to the government's Going for Housing Growth, focused on one of the 3 strands of that program, which is around, I guess, enabling more land for housing and business development. So it deals with things like housing targets, how much we need to zone, what we need to do around intensification, around spatial planning, that sort of thing. The actual implementation of it is not going to be in the next, well, more immediately. It's going to be through the new planning system. So there will be further opportunities for us to engage once they develop this policy further. So we worked up a draft submission and had some informal engagement with yourselves and received some feedback a few weeks ago. We've reflected that in the proposed submission, which is on the agenda. There has been just a few sort of more editorial tweaks to the wording, so we may need to introduce just a further resolution to delegate perhaps to the Christine there as General Manager the ability to make minor editorial changes. But really, aside from that, I think the big issue to note with what is proposed and how it affects Tauranga is that it is pushing towards the need for Tauranga to adopt significantly higher growth projections for our planning. So as a sub-region, we're planning for around 40,000 homes over the next 30 years, based on initial calculations that we've undertaken with limited information at this point because new growth projections haven't been released by Stats New Zealand. We think that number will be over 60,000, so a 50% jump. And they are, as the government are looking to impose a lot stricter requirements around that growth in terms of how we plan for it. So we will be required to ensure that it is all plan enabled, i.e. zoned effectively immediately through implementation of the new system. And all of that growth as proposed would also have to be feasible as if it was being delivered today. So from a developer's lens, that it's profitable or sufficiently profitable to progress and that is realistic to be delivered. So we think those tests are quite steep, quite a lot higher than the current tests, which we are struggling and we don't meet. And I guess what probably, we all know Tauranga will continue to grow, but we want it to grow sustainably. And I guess our key point is that more of a place-based focus around what kind of growth and what level of growth is right for Tauranga might be better than the sort of one-size-fits-all approach that the government is seeking to adopt here. So that flavour comes quite strongly through our submission as per the direction that we took from yourselves when we informally engaged on the submission. I will leave it there and hand it over to the Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Andy. Do we have any questions from Councillor Crowther?
Yeah, thank you. I think you've done a really good job sort of incorporating some of those suggested changes. My question is just in terms of the fact we're doing it as a sub-region. So I sort of tried to think in my mind about if we didn't have that partnership, if it was treated as just Tauranga City and Western Bay, obviously there'd be a lot of burden on Western Bay that's imposed by central government. And I'm looking at the waters legislation and other legislation like the LGFA funding for high growth, I think tier 1 councils. So Western Bay is not allowed to get that 350% debt revenue ratio for a growth council. They're not allowed to claim development contributions and financial contributions to anything like the extent that we can as a bigger council through some of the waters and other legislation. So on the one hand, government's making it incredibly difficult for them, but on the other hand, they're sort of saying they have to be party to this sub-regional approach, and effectively what's happening is it's just putting the burden on Tauranga ratepayers to finance a lot of this, knowing that in the past there's always been significant shortfall. So I'm just trying to tease out, like, have there been conversations with central government to explore like this discrepancy between a bunch of policies that are making it incredibly difficult for a council like Western Bay, and then this policy, which is basically saying, here you go, not only do you have to do the near impossible, as it was, but we've got to add even more houses, and we've got to add even, or more zoning for houses, and have a 20% stress test. You know, to me, that just seems amazing. So have those conversations been had, and if so, has central government got any response to the inconsistencies between their policies?
So I guess these are the issues that we've been raising with the government for, I would say, decades now. One of the other strands for the Going for Housing Growth policy is around funding and financing of infrastructure. It is, I would say, further behind in its development, and therefore our ability to understand to what extent that may or perhaps may not resolve the infrastructure funding issues that we've got. But we continue to make that point in this submission, that unless you resolve that issue, it doesn't matter how much we zone, it's not going to be able to be developed. So I think those discussions are ongoing. Obviously the city deal process is probably going to be a key mechanism to continue those discussions, but I might just see if Christine has anything further to add.
Any other questions from staff on our submission? Councillor Currick.
Thinking about the development community, if this report was socialised with the development community, what level of alignment do you think would exist between the development community and Tauranga City in terms of a submission to this bill? Would it be reasonably strong, or would it be miles apart? Just to give me an idea of the feel of the market versus DCC.
Yeah, like I think we're reasonably well aligned with the development community. We're not taking a hard line saying that we should be completely closed off, or the government policy should be closed off to maybe out of sequence development or unanticipated development, or that we should still be able to have urban limits around our city. So I guess from that perspective, we're pretty aligned, and I guess the points that we're just talking about the need to deliver more infrastructure and have better funding tools, aligns with what the developers want to see. They want to see more ability to develop. I'd hope to think we are well aligned. We do kind of engage with them pretty closely. There's always going to be issues where we have different perspectives.
Any more questions from staff? Is this the last one from Councillor Crowther?
I've sort of checked the bus schedules again. I'm still struggling a little bit with the Cameron Road, at currently less than the proposed requirement of 20 services per hour. Are we confident of that, or are we able to sort of, if it's a marginal call, like if it's actually on 20, then can we sort of say, you know, at the limit, or, you know, the sort of lower limit of that, or you know, and if it is 19, in fact, which if I've miscounted, then it's like, could we at least give a bit of an idea that we're so close, if not at it, because to me that would unlock a whole lot of potential funding especially if we had a change of government, I suspect.
Yeah, and just to your point, I think our submission's trying to get across the point that using the ONF standards, it's not black and white, like it's still going to create quite a bit of work for us to kind of work out, I guess, what the implication is on the ground. So we're trying to highlight that risk, bearing in mind it is for policy development to those officials to say, we can see you're trying to get some more efficiency and better implementation, but the method you're proposing is still going to create a lot of work and we still need to go away and understand all the numbers behind it.
If there's no further questions, thank you, staff. Thank you for all your work on this submission. And I know we've all read it several times already. Just one quick comment for all those who are listening. We've had a couple of goes at this as elected members, and it has appeared on our agenda last week online. I'd recommend that if you wish to have a in-person feedback, we're all available to receive your emails in respect to comments that you may have on our submission, and I look forward to hearing from anyone who wishes to comment on them, because it helps us ask questions at this point if we know what our general public are thinking. Right, can I have the recommendation on the screen, please? We have a recommendation for the City Futures Committee that we receive the report submission Phase 2 Resource Management Going for Growth. You will see that we have a C added. I'd like you to read it and give me a gentle nod whether you approve of C before we move on.
We approve delegation to the, rather than approves delegation to the. Yep.
Take the yourself.
Approve, yeah. Is everyone happy with C? It can be part of the substantive. Rightio, it is on the screen. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Crowther is happy to move. Do I have someone happy to? Councillor Baker is happy to second. Any discussion, Councillor Crowther?
Yeah, I think staff have done a really good job on this. I know over many years our team has been trying to encourage, if that's the right word, central government to change their approach to growth funding and planning and try to help them see the reality of the situation. I wish them good luck for the ongoing discussions, but I do think we need to do more at a political level, and I think we need to be speaking out, and I'd suggest, I would support a mechanism. I don't quite know what the right mechanism is, but to enable the Mayor to go and speak strongly with central government ministers and say it ain't making any sense for us to just have a whole lot of blanket changes and fast tracks and all this kind of stuff unless we actually do the other side of it. And I'm particularly concerned about our neighbour, where they've been really under the pump in terms of the policy settings that I mentioned before. I just think it's completely, well, I'm sorry, I won't say what I think, that could get me into trouble, but let's just say the government has been missing in action in terms of dealing with some practical issues for that council. And one of them is that if they are a Tier 1 council, they deserve the right to Tier 1 funding under LGFA. And I think we should lobby, as a smart growth partner, we should lobby for that actively at a political level with Mahe and all of us supporting. And the second thing is to lobby in terms of having equal treatment under the developer contributions regime and the waters regime. Bearing in mind we haven't reached an end point yet in terms of waters. So, all that is highly relevant, and we're sort of having to comply with a whole lot of things here, and we're putting up a little bit of a submission to kind of wave the flag for Tauranga, but I don't think that'll cut it. I think what'll cut it is high-level political pressure sustained over a number of years, including the regional deal, and I strongly urge us all to.
Councillor Baker as a seconder. And any other comments from around the room? I'd just like to relate Councillor Crowther around making changes and how it impacts us, costs to us. Changing the landscape may look great from Wellington, but it does impact us on the ground here. And every time we change regulations or do something different, it's a cost to us, to the building, and developers have to get up to speed again as well. So a bit of consistency in this would be very helpful. Okay, we have a recommendation in front of us. All those in favour say aye. Against? That is carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 9.6, lead level of service. It is on page 109. This has been to this committee once before. We took it to a workshop to better understand the policy. At that workshop, we agreed that the name didn't quite represent what the policy was trying to do, so we've recommended a name change to that. There's been several discussions had subsequently of that. I've got one question for staff on this, but I'll allow Vicky to open us, and then we'll open for questions.
Thank you for that recap. So yes, following the workshop we had, we've obviously proposed a potential new name, open to other amendments, and just throughout the document we've updated the use of the term the council to be clearer around whether it's an elected member body decision or the organisation or as staff, our actions.
And my first question, how often do we review this policy and how do we submit to the review process?
So this doesn't have a legislative requirement to review the policy, so it's when we feel that the policy has become dated or it needs a refresh. The reason why we've brought it to you in this time period is that levels of service tend to start getting developed for the LTP. So it was a good time to refresh the policy so that we had an updated guidance document for staff as we start to move into those LTP planning preparation activities.
So if we felt that we wanted to add to it or do another review, is that best to do it in the LTP process?
So you can do it now, or alternatively, we do bring you a list of all of the policies that we're suggesting go into the work program, and this committee controls that work program. So if you felt that this was a policy that you wanted to have another look at, then you put it onto that work program and just prioritise it relative to others. Yep.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the staff? There appears not. Thank you very much, staff. Any general discussion before we... Councillor Taylor.
This one sort of took the long track. I think originally it came to us and we thought it would be a quick process, but we ended up in a workshop, and I think that workshop helped me get some clarity about levels of service, so I think that was valuable. And the name change certainly does make a bit of sense. I think it just helps identify what we're doing. So, took a while to get here, but I think it's a good decision in the end.
I tend to agree with Councillor Taylor. The new name or proposed name change does help identify what this actually does in relation to the organisation as a whole. So, recommendations on... Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Taylor, I'm happy to second the recommendation that the Tauranga City Futures Committee receives the report, lead level of service policy review, agrees to update the name of the policy to standards for developing levels of service policy, and C, agrees to adopt the updated standards for developing levels of service policy with immediate effect. Verse attachment 1. All those in favour? So aye. Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Discussions of late items? No late items? No late items. Can I ask Councillor Rolleston to close the meeting for us, please?
Tēnā koe te temana, tēnā tātou katoa, ka whakakapi tō tātou hui i tēnei rā kia noi tātou. e te atua kaharawa i tēnei mātou e hui hui mai nei ana tu ana mātou ki a koe, ki a tuku ana koe a manaakitanga ki rongi a mātou, ki a pai tō mātou mahi, ki a pai tō mātou whakaaro, ki a pai tō mātou nohi te kāinga. Ko koe te kaha, ko koe te mana, mo ake ake. Āmene.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Royston. I now declare City Futures Committee meeting closed at 12:02. Thank you very much to everybody.